So, Terry's treachery and Terry's stupidity, and those 18 MPs who have submitted letters to the 1922 committee to trigger a leadership contest they're convinced will do for Boris, are guilty of both. Because what they're doing is kamikaze, it's self-indulgent, and it's totally irresponsible at a time that their terrified constituents are wondering how the hell they're going to eat and pay their bills this week. Don't these politicians see that the people who voted them into office care more about that than they do about the fact Boris may or may not have had a slice of birthday cake 2 years ago? And it can't be a coincidence that the latest bunch of Boris haters to submit these letters, people who've been very vocal in their criticism of Boris, are the people who backed Jeremy Hunt for the Tory leadership in 2019. So are they trying to oust Boris because of Partygate, or because they never wanted him to be leader in the first place? Hunt himself isn't hiding his ambitious light under a bushel, he's making it pretty clear that he'd run for the leadership again if the position became vacant, a position his supporters are currently fighting tooth and nail to make vacant. So, is this prospective leadership contest about what's good for this country and the Tory party, or is it about what's good for the people who will assume power if and when Boris goes? It wasn't long ago that many of Boris's enemies were telling us the Sue Gray report would draw a line under Partygate because they assumed he was going to get clobbered. As it turned out, Miss Gray barely laid a hand on him personally and instead criticized the culture at number 10. So now the haters are looking for another reason to get rid of Boris. Politics is a dirty business. It can also be an unprincipled, underhand business where power and personal ambition seem to matter to some MPs more than their party, and more importantly, than the British people. Do these MPs currently trying to destroy Boris want to ensure that the Tories get voted out at the next election and Sir Keir Starmer is ushered into number 10 with a motley coalition of Labour, Lib Dems, Greens and the SNP? Because that's what it looks like. Because Starmer hasn't a hope in hell of winning outright. He can only lead with a ragbag coalition of parties that aren't fit to organise a you-know-what in a brewery, let alone a country, and that will be bad for Britain. Do I have absolute confidence in Boris? No, I don't. He could have made better decisions during lockdown and been tougher about what went on in Downing Street. He has to bear some of the responsibility for that. But I have more confidence in this government, which let's not forget has just handed £15 billion to people who are struggling in this crisis, than I do in Starmer's mob. And don't forget that if Labour get into number 10, David Lammy might be a next Foreign Secretary, representing our country on the world stage. Rachel Reeves, who nearly fainted clean away when asked to define what a woman was, could be our next Chancellor. Angela Rayner could be Deputy PM and bring back all her Corbynista cronies into number 10. If that doesn't frighten the tripe out of you, nothing will. But what breed of idiot would force a leadership election in the midst of the worst cost of living crisis in a generation, An election that will take time and attention away from the most hellish crisis in living memory. Liam Fox said a couple of months ago, "Now isn't the time for others to challenge. We need to break away from a culture that sees politics as some sort of X-factor contest." And he's right. I wish I believed those politicians currently trying to kick Boris out were doing it for noble, honorable reasons. But I don't. I think some are doing it because they want their man in the job, because that means good jobs and positions of power for them. The fact is, voters have already made their minds up about Partygate, and whenever the next election is they'll make their feelings clear. That's what democracy is about. But what's happening now isn't about democracy, it's a witch hunt. And while I believe many people will never forgive Boris for allowing his staff to break rules the rest of us weren't allowed to break, I think what he does with inflation and the cost of living will determine whether he gets another term in Downing Street. But he can't do anything for the desperate people of this country while the jackals are circling. And I fear even if there was a leadership contest and Boris won it, these haters still wouldn't stop the witch hunt. They despise Boris so much they'd rather Starmer was in power than see him continue as PM. All this at a time the very poorest people in this country are suffering, and we have a government that can't get on with helping them because a bunch of MPs are so blinded by their hatred of Boris that they've lost sight of what's really important, the welfare of the British people.